And today, of course, we are joined by the great Naomi Wolf. She joins us today to talk a little bit about the admission that has now been issued around the issues of menstrual irregularities related to the vaccine therapy. And we'll bring Josh Guetzkow back. He's got some material on the vaccine that we did not get a chance to get to last time. Also, he's had a very recent interview by Dr. John Campbell. And I have some questions about that interview. I listened to part of it today. I do suggest you do follow Dr. Campbell. He's got some interesting interviews and some interesting problems that he's investigating as well. Of course, Dr. Kelly Victory is here with us. I'll be watching you out on the Rumble Rants and also on the Restream, so let's get to it.
Our laws, as it pertains to substances, are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous. I'm a doctor, for sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that? I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real. We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time. Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want to help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say.
I think everyone knows the next medical crisis could be just around the corner, whether it comes in the form of another pandemic or something much more routine like a tick bite. You and your family need to be prepared. That's where the wellness company comes in. You know the wellness company. We have their physicians on like Dr. McCullough frequently. The wellness company and their doctors are medical professionals you can trust. And their new medical emergency kits are the gold standard when it comes to keeping you safe and healthy.
It's a safety net. It's an insurance policy
absolutely.
That you hope you're not going to
100%.
need, but if you need it, you sure as heck are going to wish you had it if you need it.
Be ready for anything. This medical emergency kit contains an assortment of life-saving medications, including ivermectin, Z-Pak. The medical emergency kit provides a guidebook to aid in the safe use of all these life-saving medications. From anthrax to tick bites to COVID-19, the wellness company's medical emergency kit is exactly what you need to have on hand to be prepared. Rest assured, knowing that you have emergency antibiotics, antivirals, and antiparasitics on hand to help you and your family stay safe from whatever life throws at you next. Go to drdrew.com/TWC. That is drdrew.com/TWC to get 10% off today. Just click on that link. So let me tell you a little bit about our guest today. Josh Guetzkow is a senior lecturer at Hebrew University, sociologist, and he is, hang on, of course, I ran afoul of his, well, it's not in here. How about that? That's why I ran afoul of it. We've talked to him before. He's a PhD. He is an analyst of data, and he has some questions about some of the VAERS data in particular. And of course, our friend Naomi Wolf joins us as well, best-selling author, columnist, professor, one of the world's most influential feminist writers, Rhodes Scholar, graduate of Yale, received a doctorate from Oxford, 8 best-selling works. Of course, her legendary book, Beauty Myth, is out there. You can follow her at dailyclout.io. Also on Twitter, which is Naomi Wolf. Oh, Naomi R. Wolf. I beg your pardon. She'll be in here just a second. Let me welcome, of course, Dr. Kelly Victory will join us in a few minutes as well. Let's welcome Josh Guetzkow for a second here. Thanks, Josh. Wanted to talk to you ahead of time about what data you wanted to present to us that we did not have a chance to get to last week when you joined us.
Yeah, no problem. Really what I was hoping to share with you was something that I don't think has gotten nearly enough attention. So a lot of people talk about VAERS and the increase in reporting, the incredible, unprecedented increase in reporting of adverse events and serious adverse events and deaths to the vaccine adverse event reporting system since the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine. And basically, the CDC has done a safety signal analysis of that data and did not release it to the public, what they found. And what they found was very, very concerning. And they found over 770 safety signals for many different adverse events, some not such a big deal, like, it hurt my arm, I had pain at the injection site, but many of the adverse events are extremely serious. might be worth taking a second to step back to tell you a little bit about the story of how this all came out. Okay. Back in 2021, I started looking at the VAERS data and also from Europe and the UK. And you see this huge increase in reporting, and you start to tell people about it. And one of the first things that you'll hear is, well, we're vaccinating a lot of people. So, of course, we're going to get a lot of reports, but it's just incidental, right? It's just anything that happens to you, bad that happens to you, you're going to connect it to the vaccine. And so I started looking at how the CDC actually goes about doing an analysis. How do they tease apart sort of, when do we get worried? Okay. And I found that some papers they had published with their methodology. It's a very simple methodology. Here's what you basically do. If you have a new vaccine, you look at what percentage of the reports for that vaccine are for a particular adverse event. So let's say myocarditis. Okay, so let's say, and then you look at what proportion of reports for that event do you have out of all of the reports for this new vaccine? And you compare that to the proportion of some comparative vaccine that's been around for a long time, like the flu vaccine or all vaccines or something like that. So imagine 50% of your adverse events that are reported for this new vaccine are for myocarditis, but in the past, only 25% of the reports were for myocarditis. Oh, we have a signal, we have a safety signal, because we have a larger proportion of events being reported for that particular adverse event. Okay, it's very simple, basic math. And so I just did that, and I looked at what the signals were, and I found lots of, hundreds of very concerning safety signals. I went a step further and I said, well, maybe there's something here going on with the number of doses. Let's look at how many reports are we getting per million doses that are being given out. And what I did is I compared COVID vaccines to flu vaccines, because like COVID vaccines, flu vaccines are also given out to elderly people. And so it allows us to sort of, I was able to compare different age groups. And still, I found very concerning safety signals. And it was like flashing bright, hit you right between the eyes kind of thing. There was no way to make the signals go away. So I said, well, if I'm seeing these signals and I'm using the CDC's methodology, then the CDC must be seeing something, right? They must be seeing safety signals. And so together with a legal team at Children's Health Defense, we FOIA'd the CDC, because beginning of 2021, they put out a document on their website how they were going to go about doing safety signals, a safety signal analysis for the new COVID vaccines. And they said every week we're going to do this type of comparison that I just explained to you. It's called PRR, proportional reporting ratios. So we FOIA'd them. Well, what did you find in these proportional reporting ratios? It finally got back to us in the spring, March of 2022, and said, well, actually, we didn't do it. We didn't do a safety signal analysis of VAERS. And I was dumbstruck. I mean, this level of malfeasance was stunning to me, because they had promised everybody that they were doing everything they possibly could to monitor VAERS.
So let me say,
they promised the Congress that they were going to use this. VAERS is our early warning signal, and they completely ignored it. Go ahead.
But they didn't ignore it. They shunted it over to the FDA. They gave the responsibility to the FDA. And so let me just tell you, Joseph Freeman has recorded in interviews now with the FDA that we have heard. And on that interview, one of the many things that was actually just beyond astonishing was one of the pediatric consultants on the line from UCLA had reported several months before a sudden pediatric death within a day or two of the vaccine, and had repeatedly tried to reach the FDA for their comment analysis, what further investigation. And their comment was, oh, it must have fallen through the cracks. I mean, they should have been,
Right.
oh my God, this is, it's a 5-year-old that died with it. We need to figure this out, see what happened. They're like, fell through the cracks. And what Freeman found out was, you asked your very question, how do you determine that these safety signals are related to the vaccine, right? That's the question you're asking. And you know what their response was?
That's not the question that I'm asking.
Well, let me tell you,
not the question
just so you know. All right, good. I'll get your question clarified. But this was the question I had thought you were asking, which was, what are you doing with these safety signals that jump out? How first thing is, are they related to the vaccine? And the Freeman asked that, and their response was, how do we analyze it? Well, we got a guy. We got a guy that goes out and looks at it. We got a guy, one human being is charged with the responsibility to do something that is actually impossible. What I keep saying is, what if they had a guy that was there to determine whether Vioxx caused heart attacks or not? Well, their guy might have said, no, I think Vioxx is fine. Instead, we have a multi-billion-dollar suit and multiple people dead for the impropriety with which they overlook that data. They didn't, and then they didn't attempt to have a guy brush it aside. They just ignored it straight away. In this case, they're ignoring it by sending a guy out to look at it. It's astonishing. It's astonishing what's going on.
I'd rather they only paid one guy than 100 guys to reach the same conclusion, right? Because at least they're saving us money. They're not going to do their job one way or another. I mean, we've just seen this is a captured agency, right? This notion of agency capture is a standard concept of political science, and we see that in every day in every way. But the question that I was asking wasn't, are these safety signals related to the vaccine? That's the second step, or one of the second steps. But first, you have to find a safety signal. But you won't find a safety signal if you're not looking for it. And the CDC wasn't even looking for safety signals. It's at that level of malfeasance, okay? Now, later, a journalist, Zach Stieber at Epoch Times, followed up on this, and he was told something similar to what you said, which is, first of all, he was told that they did start a safety signal analysis. Coincidentally, about a week after they answered us and told us that they didn't do a safety signal analysis.
Right.
They did it for a few months, and they told him we stopped because we were finding the same thing that the FDA was finding. The FDA uses a slightly different methodology. And so there was no reason to do that. And it took him like another 5 months to get the results of the safety signal analysis that they did. And the results are stunning. Take a look. I brought a graphic summary I did of sort of some of the largest safety signals. This would be number 4, slide number 4. And this just gives you a sense of the major categories of adverse events that the CDC itself found. And these are the tens of thousands. These are the numbers of reports within all of these different types of these major categories of adverse events. The total, tens of thousands of different adverse events. Let's look at the cardiovascular one, which is the next slide, just to give you a sense of, so you've got atrial fibrillation and myocarditis, cardiac failure, cardiac arrest rate. These are very, very serious safety signals. And there's something I should point out here is that, so myocarditis gives a safety signal, and we know, and it's been admitted that myocarditis is connected to the vaccine. Well, 2/3 of all of the safety signals that they found were stronger than the safety signal for myocarditis. So a question for you, for anybody, any reasonable person listening to this is, why hasn't the CDC told anybody about this? And why haven't they followed up on these safety signals? You might remember late last year, there was this notification that went out all over the place about the safety signal that they had after the bivalent boosters. There was maybe a stroke signal, okay? And it was plastered all over the media, and they said, well, we're looking into it, but it looks like it was a false signal and it's not really work. But they had a huge plan of all the research they were going to do to follow up on it and make sure that it was okay. You know how many how many signals of stroke they found in their safety signal analysis of the regular vaccines. 26 different safety signals, and that would be on slide 9 that I sent.
Well, hold on. Before you go ahead, before you move it, oh goodness, well, there they are.
What?
But stroke is stroke, right? It's the anatomical distribution. It's all the same thing.
Right.
Well, transverse sinus
And
thrombosis is a little different. The coons are a little different. But where the infarct occurs is what it is. It's just there's hypercoagulation. But hang on, go back to the cardiac stuff, because what's interesting on that is that if you add up, if you put together, the all cardiac events. There you are. If you put atrial fibrillation, irregular heartbeat, myocarditis, pericarditis, cardiac flutter, ventricular extrasystoles, those are all the same thing. Those are all the same. Those are all caused by focal myocarditis. All of it. And it's all the same thing. And I've seen a ton of it clinically. Interestingly, I've seen none of it in elderly. None of it. And a lot of it in young. And that should be even more alarming. Because guess what? The elderly have a ton to be gained from this vaccine. So they might be willing to take a little more risk, but they're not even taking this risk. Could you have the age breakdown was going to be my question. Because I'm betting 90% of this was under the age of 60.
I don't have, so the CDC's, I'm just taking numbers from the CDC. This isn't all of, by the way, this isn't all the cardiovascular signals that they found. These are just kind of the top ones. But, they don't break it down by age.
It's all caused by myocarditis.
Now, in my safety signal analysis that I did in the fall of 2021, late summer, I did break it down by ages, and I looked at the 65 plus group, and there were also very strong, concerning safety signals for death for the different adverse events that I looked at. I
keep hearing that from Steve Kirsch. I keep hearing that from him, and I just don't see it. I just haven't seen it clinically, but I've certainly seen it. There's like 50 and 40-year-olds like crazy. All of this, and there's actually some papers out now that show that most of all those rhythm disturbances, maybe even including sudden death, which I don't have an opinion on yet because we don't have the data, but is due to a focal scarring from myocarditis. So the myocarditis gets missed, and then the rhythm disturbances kick in a few years later. A few months later. Question is, does COVID do the same thing? Well, some people have said it does do the same thing. Does it do it at the same rate? I don't see it. I haven't seen it, but it might. But somebody's got to do these studies. No one's doing it. But hang on, Josh.
Well, there are some studies out there. There are a number of studies that show that the myocarditis induced by the vaccine is more frequent and more problematic.
I have seen that.
There are some studies that will, differ from that, but
there's also studies that say the COVID is more likely to do it, but there really are no head-to-head kinds of studies because they're almost impossible to do. I don't know how they do it, but I mean, how are you going to distinguish COVID from vaccine from COVID plus vaccine in a world where everyone has had COVID in the vaccine? How are you going to do that?
Absolutely,
and so it's very, very difficult.
It's very difficult.
So we're going to take a break. Go ahead, finish your thought, and then we'll take the break.
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
Okay, because I got to get Naomi in here. I got to get Kelly Victory in here, and I'll pull back a little bit. Okay. I've got some questions, but finish up. All right, we'll do that right after the break. Bring everybody in here. Fall is right around the corner, which means dry, flaky red skin from allergy season is coming with it. But the best way to take care of your skin is with our skincare secret, Genucel. You don't need to worry about that puffy, tired eye look or those annoying dark spots or even dry, flaky skin because Genucel Skincare has you covered. Susan and I love our Genucel products so much, we want you to try our personally curated skincare bundles. It's risk-free at Genucel.com/Drew. Genucel works so well, you can see the results in this unplanned live moment on our show when the Redness Repair Cream repaired my skin in just minutes right before your eyes. Their concentrated vitamin C serum helps keep your skin plump and hydrated. Plus, with their immediate effects, you can see astonishing results in under 12 hours. Quick, effective, and easy. Go to Genucel.com/Drew right now to try our bundles and save over 60% today. And remember to enroll in Genucel's world-class concierge program for additional savings and free shipping. Don't wait. It's genucel.com/Drew, GENUCEL.com/DREW. There are three reasons the central banks are dumping the U.S. dollar: inflation, deficit spending, and our insurmountable national debt. The fact is, there is one asset that has withstood famine, wars, political and economic upheaval dating back to biblical times: gold. And you can own it in a tax-sheltered retirement account with the help of Birch Gold. That's right, Birch Gold will help you convert an existing IRA or 401k, maybe from a previous employer, into an IRA in gold. And the best part, you don't pay a penny out of pocket. Just visit birchgold.com/Drew for your free info kit. They'll hold your hand through the entire process. Think about this. When currencies fail, gold is a safe haven. How much more time does the dollar have? Birch Gold has an A+ rating with Better Business Bureau and thousands of happy customers. I do not give financial advice, and previous performance is no guarantee of future performance. Visit birchgold.com/Drew to get your free info kit on gold. That is birchgold.com/DREW. These products have transformed my life and Susan's and saved our marriage. Discover the key to oral hygiene, regardless of your current daily dental routine. Whether you diligently brush and floss multiple times a day, or you struggle, you got bleeding gums, bad breath, plaque buildup, this revelation is for both of you. Surprisingly, over 350,000 Americans experience health issues that may be connected to their toothbrush or even caused by it, ranging from heart or blood sugar problems, forgetfulness, digestive difficulties, immune issues, all related to oral hygiene. Scientific studies have shown that a simple switch of your toothbrush can lead to a healthier teeth and potentially save your marriage. Yes, save your marriage. Our study, we did a personal study. My wife, Susan, hates the sound of the sonic toothbrushes, but introducing the Real White Sonic toothbrush, of course, also their hydroxyapatite dirty mouth mineral toothpaste by Primal Life Organics, these products have transformed my life and Susan's and saved our marriage. It's much quieter. It's a very powerful toothbrush, but it is quiet and it saved our marriage. So, the Real White Sonic toothbrush from Primal Life Organics stands out among all other electric toothbrushes I've tried. It effectively eliminates plaque, harmful bacteria, promotes gum health. Get yours and enjoy 60% off at naturaltoothbrush.com/DREW. Some platforms have banned the discussion of controversial topics. If this episode ends here, the rest of the show is available at drdrew.tv.
There's nothing in medicine that doesn't boil down to a risk-benefit calculation. It is the mandate of public health to consider the impact of any particular mitigation scheme on the entire population. This is uncharted territory, Drew.
And at this point, we are welcoming in Dr. Kelly Victory. Dr. Rich, I'll give you a couple minutes with Josh. We had a little bit of a choppy sort of transition there because there's a lot of delay because poor Josh is maybe 10 or 11 hours ahead on a time zone far, far away. But we appreciate him being here. You can, by the way, follow him on X at JoshG99. And the Substack is, I hope I'm getting this right, Jack A. Napes, Napes. Dr.
Well,
Victory,
I've changed it. It's researchrebel.substack.com. It's a little easier on the tongue, rolls off the tongue a little easier.
Okay, well, welcome, Josh. Really happy to have you back, and I appreciate you putting up with the late hour where you are. I know our viewers will find this shocking, but I'm actually going to push back a little bit on what you guys were just talking about. I reject the idea that we do not have data and evidence that these myocarditis cases are a result of the vaccine, not COVID, Drew. And we've got Peter McCullough coming back Wednesday next week on the 11th, and he can speak more authoritatively than I with regard to this. But the studies are very clear that the people who have suffered sudden cardiac arrest, for example, is absolutely myocarditis that is vaccine induced. And they also have now plenty of autopsy data, unfortunately, that shows very clearly that the spike protein that is causing the myocarditis is vaccine-induced spike. We have the stains that show you are able to differentiate clearly between vaccine-induced spike protein and virus spike protein. They stain differently. The nucleocapsid is different. So you can say very clearly the spike proteins that are globbed up in the myocardium are a result of the vaccine, not the virus. And as I said, I'll leave it to Peter next week to really speak. That's really the main topic I want to address with him, is to put to bed the idea that these are COVID-related cardiac injuries rather than vaccine-related. So I'll leave it at that for a second. What I want to, I share your apoplexy, Josh, regarding the CDC's abdication of duty to investigate the VAERS reports. Let me just clarify one thing you said, which is that, VAERS is our early warning system. No, VAERS was their early warning system. They own that system. They designed it. The CDC, NIH, and HHS own that. It's not like a bunch of tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorists, anti-vaxxers like you and me, created this system. This is, I say that was tongue in cheek, by the way. This is their system. They own it. They are obligated to investigate it. So not only have they not looked at the VAERS data, but then during COVID, they created this whole second system of early warning sign called VSafe. And they were going to optimize the cell phone, the idea that everybody was going to, sign up on their cell phone, and within hours and days and weeks after the vaccine, they could report in real time any bad events or any ill effects they were having from the vaccines. After a period of time, they just stopped that study. They shut down the VSafe system, and they have never reported out the data from VSafe. So 2 questions for you. Number 1, have you been able to get your hands on any of the data? Because if it were good, I promise you, if it were good, we'd be hearing all about it. Have you been able to get your hands on any of the data that they clearly captured from VSafe? And then the second question is, when you look at the VAERS data, are you seeing a decrease in reports, an increase in reports? What's the trajectory of the reports coming? So 2 questions I'll throw to you right there.
Well, the VSafe data, they only released essentially the immunogenicity data, which is sort of a preset number of, I think, about 8 to 12 different questions. Did you have swelling? Did you have a fever? Did you have this? And that's been analyzed. The Informed Consent Action Network got hold of that, and that's been analyzed sufficiently. What hasn't been released are the open field questions where people could type in what they wanted or what they were experiencing, and that hasn't been released. Nor has the pregnancy data. There have been reports, the CDC reports on that. I just want to let you know that my battery looks like it's about to die, and for some reason my plug isn't working. So if you lose me, oh well. And then when you say pattern of reporting over time in VAERS, what time frame are we talking about here?
What it meant was just in terms of the pure numbers. When we know when the vaccine program was rolled out, we were seeing an just overwhelming number of reports to VAERS of all different sorts of things. Absolutely. Are those numbers continuing to go up or down?
Well, no, because people are not, they're up, they're higher than in the past, historically, but because people are getting fewer injections, there are fewer reports. But there's still a backlog of reports, and there are new reports coming in, like, people who died 2 years ago, suddenly their reports are showing up. It's interesting though, because there was a huge influx. So in August 2020, the CDC contracted with a big company to get ready for the deluge of reports. They were expecting, instead of getting 1,000 reports a week, they were expecting to get 1,000 reports a day. Instead of 5% serious adverse events, they were expecting 40% adverse events. That was in August of 2020. Why were they expecting that already back then? That's a good question. But even though they paid them like $10 million and they hired all these people, they immediately experienced a deluge that they couldn't even, they couldn't come up with. You can see that in picture number 3 that I sent you from an internal report from that company to the CDC showing this huge spike, very early on that they couldn't get out, and they ended up having to renegotiate the contract, hire a bunch more people, and it took them 6 months just to go through the backlog of reports. And yet the CDC will tell you all the time that they are not seeing any safety signal. This is what is known as interocular trauma. Okay, it hits you between the eyes, and there's no getting away from it. People dismiss VAERS, and they say, well, anybody can report to VAERS. The quality of the data, you can't trust it. But like you said, it's the CDC's and the FDA system. If they had a problem with it, they should fix it. But they don't. In fact, they use the data to publish in top medical journals like JAMA and Lancet. And so, if the data are really that poor quality, they shouldn't be able to publish them in those top medical journals, right? So it doesn't make any sense. In any way, we don't make a decision about a safety signal based on 1 or 2 or 3 reports. You look at the total number of reports, you do this mathematical comparison. It's very straightforward. And it doesn't depend on the number of reports you're getting. It depends on the proportion. And in fact, the more reports you get, the more it's likely to drown out safety signals. So people who say, well, there's so many, new reports and it's just the number of people getting vaccinated, they don't know what they're talking about. It just doesn't work that. And I know we have to
as you say, I want to bring Naomi into this conversation because there are specific things we want to talk about.
I think a really nice transition to what Naomi is going to talk about is the safety signals that are related to menstruation. That's picture number 8 that I sent. And this was the top sort of menstrual adverse events that were reported for menstruation issues, right? And you see all of these things that were dismissed early on. I remember an article in a newspaper in Israel in like February that was talking about this because it was happening. It was so frequent, you couldn't handle it. So they had to address it somehow, and they basically said it's probably just stress. But we'll look into it. But it's probably just women being hysterical or whatever.
Well, the reason I asked the question, Josh, about the trajectory of the reports to VAERS is because one of my many fears about this whole thing is that as time goes by, as the period of time from people's vaccination extends, that people, and certainly doctors who already want their head in the sand and already have blinders on and already don't want to acknowledge that these are vaccine related, people won't connect the dots. So if all of a sudden you're, 9 months, 12 months, 18 months past your last shot and you are diagnosed with a turbo cancer, or you all of a sudden have a fertility issue, or do people still say this may well be a vaccine-related side effect? And so my fear is that the reports to VAERS will drop off when the inclination of the powers that be is already to say, see, that everything's back to normal, we're all okay, carry on, nothing to see here. When in fact, many of the things that we are seeing, the ill effects and disease processes are in fact, just a delayed effect of the vaccine.
Absolutely. And, we talked last week about how short the actual, clinical trial of Pfizer's clinical trial was, and how they quickly vaccinated the placebo group. So there's no long-term studies there.
Exactly.
VAERS won't capture long-term effects because people don't put 2 and 2 together. And the way that they study adverse events using medical record data, right? The CDC does this. There are many studies that do this. They look at a very narrow window, like first 4 weeks, 6 weeks after vaccination. And here's the trick. They say, is the number of adverse events or the number of medical problems people are looking at, and they usually only look at a dozen or so, is it higher in the, say, 4 to 8 weeks after the vaccination than it is in the next period after vaccination? So if you go from 0 to 4 weeks, let's compare that to 4 to 8 weeks. Do we see a higher, but what if it's high in both periods? Then you're not going to see you're not going to find you're not going to find a problem there because your comparison is all messed up. And that's basically what most of these studies do, where you say, oh, we published in JAMA that there was no problem. Well, yeah, but your methodology, is highly problematic. Right. So it's,
Let's take a break here, Drew. And get Naomi in. Yeah, I agree. So
okay, we just bring her straight. There she is. Naomi, welcome as always. And I was watching a little video before we all got in here of my last apology to you. So do I need to apologize again or for anything else? I'm getting used to it, and I find it rather satisfying now when you're right.
Dr. Drew, it's after Yom Kippur, and I think you're in a really much better position than just about every other male doctor in the world. Maybe there are 6 of them who have, recognized what a serious issue this is, and you're the only one who's actually apologized for not recognizing it sooner. So I think you're in good shape morally. And
you're being kind. You're being kind by saying I did not recognize it sooner. I did. I recognized it when you reported it, and I dismissed it. It was worse. I dismissed what you were telling me, and that's really what was inexcusable. I was very dismissive, and that's not okay. The hubris is the enemy right now for all of us, and there was my bit of hubris creeping in. But Naomi, I wonder if you noticed on the data that Josh threw up there, and Caleb, if you can put it up again, the menstrual data, slide 8. It's all the same thing. Every single one of those observations is menstrual irregularity of varying degrees with varying frequencies and varying sort of manifestations. But it's called menometrorrhagia. It should be one category, which is heavy, irregular, or no, or painful. It's all the same, or more frequent, or postmenopausal. It's all the same. So literally, they're dividing it up into 10 different categories and going, oh, hey, look, there's no big problem here with, say, intramenstrual bleeding. It's a smaller degree of number of people. But in fact, it's all the same thing.
Yeah, they used, many of your viewers know that for the last nearly 2 years, I've been overseeing a group of 3,250 doctors and nurses and scientists who are going through the tens of thousands of Pfizer documents released under court order, and they've issued 85 reports. And one of the reports has kind of a mirror image of this slide from the Pfizer documents as opposed to from VAERS. And it also breaks down horrible things happening to women's menstrual cycles in these sort of slices, right? But there's like 10,000, 15,000 women in each kind of cell or line, bleeding every day, not bleeding at all, passing tissue, agonizing cramps. I guess what I would say, if we're on a journey together, Dr. Drew, of really hearing women, I agree with you. You're making the point, and I think it's the right one, that by teasing out these different subcategories of women suffering menstrually and getting basically menstrual disease, we need to coin new language for it, right? Because A, it's never happened before like this in human history, and B, no one takes what happens to women menstrually seriously in the first place. So we have inadequate language. But apart from your very good point that by teasing these problems with menses into subcategories, they're playing with the math to make it look less alarming. Right. I would say that as a woman, these are all really different and equally, it's a chamber of horrors, right? And so it's one chamber of horrors if your period goes away altogether and you can never have a baby, right? It's another kind of chamber of horrors. And actually, Israel was the source of this, because in Israel, you have communities that track menstrual cycles very carefully because they're Orthodox Jews. And so sexual relations between husband and wife can only resume after a woman has stopped menstruating, had a mikveh ritual bath, and kind of been sort of made sure that she is done with her period. So in Israel, women are asking their rabbis for dispensation from sexual intercourse with their husbands, because they're vaccinated husbands, because they're getting such agonizing menstrual cramps after having sex with their vaccinated husbands. And that is something that was referenced in the Pfizer documents, that vaccinated men, there's something in the sperm of
Okay.
Facing the Beast also, Naomi, is it in the new book, Facing the Beast?
A fair amount of it is, but the drilling down into the various ways in which women's lives are being ruined through something that is being, that I think is being minimized even now that studies are, 2.5 years late confirming that women are having problems with their menstrual cycles. I guess what I'm trying to stress is that this is not just menstrual dysregulation. No language that the scientific establishment is using now, even though they are grudgingly admitting that I was right in June of 2021 when my life was turned upside down by accurately saying on Twitter, women are having menstrual problems. I guess what I'm trying to say is these are disabling conditions, many of them. Bleeding every day is a disabling condition.
So let me,
but look, real quick, Kelly, real quick, I want to apologize again because you're making me realize not only was I dismissive, like, oh no, we see menstrual regularities all the time. I was dismissive on another level, which is I wasn't taking this seriously because women and their menstrual cycles. I mean, I was guilty of that also, and so as usual, we can all do better, and this is a great opportunity to examine ourselves on this. And as a male physician, I A, shouldn't have dismissed your observation, and B, we all should be not so dismissive about women and their menstrual functioning. It's something that we are casual about at best. So thank you for refining that. Kelly, go ahead. I'm sorry.
You're very welcome.
Yeah.
So, sorry, Dr. Victory, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, let me take this a little bit different direction. I agree with you wholeheartedly, and we were seeing this clinically, Naomi, and I have said from the beginning that I anticipated we would see huge problems related to these vaccines and fertility and reproductive issues. And sure enough, we are. So there are two big questions, two big elephants, I think, in the room. Number one is addressing the why. What is it about these vaccines that is causing this huge array of fertility and menstrual issues? But another thing that no one is addressing is that if we just assume, oh, these are all related to the vaccine, that's fine. But women who are having abnormal menses of all of these sorts, all of these categories, require a workup for lots of other things. Let me tell you right now, postmenopausal women who start bleeding, you can't just say, wow, that's an awful vaccine injury.
Yeah.
We need to do endometrial biopsies to make sure they don't actually have uterine
cancer
cancer.
workup.
Young women, so all of these people need a cancer workup. All of these women need workups for polycystic, ovary disease. They need workups for all kinds of things. This isn't just a simple, oh, look how awful which it is awful, but the reality is we have now tens of thousands, or millions of women, hundreds of thousands, I don't know what the actual numbers are, who now need really extensive, full, soup to nuts workups to find out what is causing this. Is it deposition of the spike proteins? But we have just opened a can of worms that I don't even know where you begin with women's health to start addressing this, because these are not simple workups. The idea of doing an endometrial biopsy in every postmenopausal woman, which is your obligation. If you're having bleeding after menopause, it is cancer until proven otherwise. I mean, that is cancer until proven otherwise. Just think what that is going to mean. So, I'll hand it back to you, Naomi, because you've got lots to talk about the actual data, but I'm throwing that out there.
I'm so glad you did. Thank you, Kelly. I mean, it's everybody knows. Like, how does everybody not know that postmenopausal bleeding is a terrible warning sign of terrible things that are wrong? And so I guess when you're speaking, you're absolutely right. And what I would say there is by turning menstruation, which was a healthy process and a sign of a woman's health, into a disease state, like moving it over into a disease state, what you've just described is going to bring billions of dollars to, in addition to the medical industry, right? All those tests. And I also want to add on the emotional side, the fear, every time you have, not just the fear that you might have cancer if you're a postmenopausal woman bleeding, but if your period is so irregular and you're trying to have a baby, then every month when you have spotting or 2 periods a month or all the weird multiplication of
Right.
periods that you see in the Pfizer documents, you're going to think you've lost the baby. You probably have, or lost that pregnancy. And if you're trying not to get pregnant, then every time you don't get your period on time, you're going to have a pregnancy test. You're going to freak out. You're going to
Right.
have a horrible discussion with your boyfriend or your husband. You're going to go to an abortionist. I mean, or make plans for having a baby that you're not anticipating, or it's not coming at a time that you want.
Right.
It basically, I'm trying to describe women's lives being turned to hell, turned upside down with every single one of these,
Right.
neutral sounding little categories on these scientific documents, whether it's VAERS or in the Pfizer documents. And as a woman, right? So good. Shannon, shocker, women being ignored about problems only they experience. This led me to what I wanted to say to the men in this discussion. And I'm so glad the men are here, but it's been like a weird 2 years, because for 2 years I've been trying, as you see, to raise the alarm about this. And mostly the men who will speak to me are religious Christian and Jewish priests and rabbis. The liberal men don't care about it, won't talk about it. The medical establishment didn't care about it, won't talk about it. So I appreciate you, gentlemen. But what I was going to say is, it's literally like if a bunch of men were saying, my penis, I'm having a discharge from my penis, or my testicles, there's like lumps on my testicles, or I'm having problems with erection, or problems with ejaculation, or I'm not sure I'm fertile anymore. It would be like the universe would stop functioning until everyone found out what was wrong with the penises and testicles of men. And I just put that there.
Well, truly, as I said, I'm trying to elevate this to, it's absolutely debilitating for women and the impact on them, but the implications, potentially the health implications, are profound. Let's talk just about the issue of fertility. We know, and you and I have been talking about this, we've reported on it before, that if you look at birth rates around the world, they are down universally in those countries that have been highly vaccinated. Most of Western Europe is down somewhere in the range of 6 to 9%. Certain places like Taiwan was down 26%. The United States birth rates are down somewhere around 7%. And interestingly, we do not see those decreases in birth rates in places like sub-Saharan Africa that were largely not vaccinated for COVID. So let's just talk about the impact of fertility and what you're seeing there, independent of all the horrific things people are, not that not being able to get pregnant, if you wanted to get pregnant, isn't horrific, but let's talk just about what you're seeing in terms of fertility rates.
Yes. Thank you. So Facing the Beast does go into detail about this, because I think this is the greatest issue facing humanity right now. Those numbers are the right range, and Igor Chudov, who's a mathematician on Substack, has some pretty comprehensive essays that I cite in Facing the Beast, which show, and they're from government databases, which show that there are basically 1 million missing babies, 1 million missing live births in Western Europe. And he also shows a 13 to 20% drop in live births, especially in Western Europe and North America. And it's not rocket science. We know basic biology. I mean, one of the things that's clearly happening with all of this, it's not just menstrual dysregulation, right? As I understand what menstruation is, if you bleed in the middle of your cycle, or you bleed postmenopausally, there's something wrong with your uterine lining. Your uterine lining is being shed or dissolved in some way. And so that matters, because the way you have babies, if you're of childbearing age, is that a blastocyte attaches to the uterine wall, right? So something's destabilizing the uterine wall with these vaccines, so that implantation of the blastocyte is more difficult. And I guess when you were asking about what could be the mechanism, our volunteers' reports have identified, in the Pfizer documents for that matter, which are so clearly focused on messing up women's menstrual cycles, it's like the centerpiece of the Pfizer documents. That's why I say it's intentional. But there are two mechanisms people should know about. One is, although all the CDC and the spokespeople said that the injection materials stay in your deltoid. They don't. And Pfizer knew that, and the CDC knew that, and the FDA knew that.
Right.
And so the Pfizer documents show, and we've talked about this, a biodistribution. This confirms, finding that Steve Kirsch and Brett Weinstein found a couple of years ago, biodistribution of the materials throughout the body. But they especially accumulate in the ovaries. So you've got, and this includes lipid nanoparticles, which are an industrial fat covered in polyethylene glycol, which is a petroleum product. So these are accumulating in your ovaries. And I'm an English major and I see what's wrong with this, right? Because a fatty substance covered in a toxin is accumulating in your ovaries with the first shot. Our volunteers have found no way in which lipid nanoparticles leave the body. Then they accumulate more with the second shot in your ovaries. Then with the first booster, they're going to accumulate more. And I have whistleblowers, nurses, and midwives writing to me saying that they, in surgery for completely unrelated things abdominally, are seeing blocked fallopian tubes in vaccinated women. So there's almost a mechanical, blockage of the ovaries and fallopian tubes.
You guys, we don't really know yet. We were seeing all these things that are candidate potential mechanisms. And I know, Kelly, you and I spoke to Ryan Cole, who showed us slides of not just ovarian accumulation of both spike and lipid nanoparticles. He also showed us intrauterine thrombosis, right? There's something, there may be, it might have been Thorpe that showed us that there's something going on in terms of the clotting mechanisms affecting the lining of the uterus. So there's three mechanisms right there. There's a fourth now, which is getting on people's radar, which is plasmids. Plasmid story has yet to be told, and there may be DNA plasmids binding and releasing from the ovaries actually causing this. Have you heard that theory, Naomi?
Oh, a couple of things. I mean, you're right on it, Dr. Drew. So the story we broke a couple of days ago on Daily Clout was that the White House knew about high levels of thrombotic thrombocytopenia, blood clots, lung clots, leg clots, as well as myocarditis in May of 2021, freaked out, drove an emergency meeting with Dr. Walensky, Dr. Fauci, to create a script, which is completely redacted, to deal with, quote, tough QA about, quote, COVID. So, yes, and the Pfizer documents also show blood clotting, clotting problems are rife with the vaccine. And, what is uterine lining and menstruation? It's a blood issue, right? So that you're right that's one mechanism. And I guess the last thing I want to say is I went to Kevin McKernan's lab a couple of days ago with my husband as the cameraman, and he showed me the vials of Moderna and Janssen. And by the way, Moderna is cloudy, which is really interesting and creepy. You can kind of see the thickness and the grayness of the viscosity of the liquid. And he has found, he's a founder of Medicinal Genomics. He does PCR testing, and he found plasmids and fragments of DNA in the Moderna vial. So he was explaining to me what that does. I don't know yet the effect that would have on menstruation, but it can't be good. And I guess the last thing I would say about a possible mechanism is that lipid nanoparticles traverse membranes, and they traverse every membrane in the human body. Right. So that they are going to, if they traverse every membrane, Dr. Thorpe, shows placentas that have been, ruined. Right. Independent midwives we're in touch with are confirming this because these lipid nanoparticles are traversing them. So if you've got something traversing membranes of the human body, you've got something else that could be destabilizing the uterine lining and the uterine environment.
There's no question that we have known, and Drew and I did a show over a year ago now, Drew, just on lipid nanoparticles. We've known for decades that lipid nanoparticles are very problematic, particularly to the reproductive organs. As you said, Naomi, Pfizer knew, and we know because we have the study out of Japan well before the vaccines were launched to the public, they knew darn well that the material did not stay in the deltoid muscle of the arm and that it traveled 11% of it concentrating in the ovaries and testes. So between the mRNA and the lipid nanoparticle, we knew that there was going to be trouble in those hormone-producing organs of the testes and the ovaries. The other thing I will mention that I would throw out there in terms of back to this issue of birth rates and fertility, and I raised the alarm flag about this again before the vaccines were ever launched, which is that one of the portions of the spike protein that you are intended to make antibodies to bears a remarkable resemblance to a protein that is required for placental development called Synctin-1. And therefore, I said, if you create antibodies, as you are intended to do, to the spike protein, I guarantee there will be some crossover, and those antibodies will think that the placenta is also foreign, and they will attack the placenta, and they will keep it from implanting and developing. And sure enough, that is exactly what we are seeing, is an autoimmune attack on the placenta. And I think this is likely contributing significantly to spontaneous miscarriages and the failure to implant. So I think it was predicted. It happened, and they simply won't address it. So I think when you look at the placental issues, you're seeing, as you said, autoimmune issues plus these horrific blood clots. Ryan Cole showed us placentas that were way small for gestational age. In other words, a placenta that would feed a 6-week-old gestation, not a 6-month-old gestation, and these are really, really problematic. So yeah, I assume, like me, Naomi, you take no great joy in having been right. There's some relief, I suppose, in vindication. But here's my question to you: the data are unassailable. You've been proven right again. I've been proven right over and over again, not because I was a good guesser, because it was clear what was going, okay? Why is it, with all of this data, all of this evidence, I don't see that we're winning the battle? They're still pushing these shots. They're still recommending them for pregnant and lactating women. What is it in your mind do you think needs to happen to turn the tide?
Well, it honestly depends on what day it is, whether I feel like we're winning or losing. But I do think we've had significant recent victories. Because Pfizer has lost $150 billion in value since we started reporting out these facts, and other people did too. And they're back to where they were before 2020. So all that massive, balloon of profit, which was based on lying to us and hurting us and killing us, and funded by our taxpayer dollars, paradoxically, that's gone. And I also do hear, as many beatings as we've taken, as much reputational attacks as have been directed at us, I do hear that people in the land of CNN and PR and young adults, especially, who are the ones most at risk of never having babies, or having their babies not be born, or spontaneously aborted, and so on. Word is getting out, and people who used to think I was crazy are now kind of acknowledging, should have listened to you. So, not that that's important. What's important is just saving the human species. So those are victories, because thousands, if not millions, of lives have been saved by us not shutting up, and using every channel available to us. Now, that said, as you may know, I don't think this is a normal time in which there's just greedy pharmaceutical companies and captured regulatory agencies being not careful enough, or exploiting a situation. And, it's not like The Jungle, Upton Sinclair's, story about corrupt institutions and tainted, that and meat. I think, and I've shared this with you, and more evidence is coming out showing that I'm right about this, not that I want to be, that a war is being waged against us. And my original research found that these injections are manufactured by the Chinese Communist Party and distributed by the Chinese Communist Party, and that in 2021 the IP, the intellectual property, was transferred 100%, according to the SEC filing, to China for Pfizer BioNTech injections, COVID injections. So I think this is related to what's going on at the border. And I'm the daughter of immigrants, granddaughter of immigrants. I believe in legal immigration, but there's a war, and millions of people, many of them of fighting age, are flowing in over the border. And at the same time, people are dying and being disabled in Western Europe and North America. And babies are aborting and being miscarried in Western Europe and North America. So bad people want a world in which the United States is not a superpower, in which people who live in the United States never knew what it meant to be citizens of a free republic because they come from authoritarian regimes, and in which those of us who do remember aren't reproducing ourselves. And we're, Ed Dowd said, like, we're on track for that in 5 years. It's like, inject everyone with this disabling, sterilizing injection, try to do it 5 times, flow people in who have no memory of living in a republic, of not being desperately poor and subjected to authoritarian regimes, and wait 5 years, and you're going to have a completely different reality in Western Europe and North America. And it's one in which we won't be able to fight back as free people. It'll be, kind of World Economic Forum serfdom. So that's what I really think is happening. And I will say again, I don't want to say it. I want to be wrong. I want to have misstated. There aren't that many people who have looked at the Pfizer documents, in detail and read every one and edited every one of 85 reports that these experts put together. I have done so. And I've looked at those sections in the Pfizer documents where they say things like, 2 babies died in utero due to, quote, maternal exposure to the vaccine. And they just say it. They know that this injection is killing those 2 babies, killed those 2 babies. And they didn't stop everything and say to the FDA, we killed 2 babies in utero. We know it was exposure to the vaccine. No, they, as you say, doubled up. To this day, people send me ads about, pregnant women have to get this injection. The other thing we haven't talked about is mRNA spike protein and lipid nanoparticles in breast milk, which I also sounded the alarm about. Broke that story with the volunteers. In the Pfizer documents, 4 women have blue-green breast milk, and babies are, like, there's another chart which would chill your soul of babies getting sick from drinking vaccinated mom's milk. In the Pfizer documents, this many babies had swelling of their flesh. This many babies had fever. This many babies had convulsions. This many babies, one baby died. They brought this poor baby to the hospital. It had organ system failure. And Pfizer just documents this. They know they're sickening babies. And look at, breastfeeding has gone from 34% of babies and moms to 14%. And just look around you. The world has changed. Look around you. Do you ever see really heavily pregnant women anymore? You see women with tiny bumps, but do you ever see women who are like really, really pregnant at a normal size, late stage pregnancy? You don't. And this confirms what our midwives and nurses who are talking on background to me are saying, that babies don't come to term. They have to deliver them early because the placenta isn't growing normally. And you don't see babies breastfeeding anymore, really. You don't see moms and babies breastfeeding almost ever. So it's a different world in which the female body has been poisoned and butchered.
Well, I just see a really stark difference between what we're doing here in the United States and what they're doing elsewhere. The UK put a moratorium on vaccinating pregnant women or lactating women or even young women trying to get pregnant over a year ago now. They put the brakes on. In contradistinction, ACOG, the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology here in the United States, is doubling down. Never before in the history of medicine have we given a drug or a therapeutic to a group of people on whom it was specifically not tested. This is the first time I'm aware of. I've been practicing medicine for more than 30 years. I have never known of us to give a drug or therapeutic to groups of people. And this wasn't tested on these people. On the other hand, they clearly knew what it was going to do. And I think that it is very, very troubling. Independent of all the issues with regard to fertility and menstrual issues, even if you take those things out, Naomi, the incidence of ill effects from the vaccine seem to have a preponderance towards women. Women are more affected by all of things, with the exception of myocarditis. Everything else that is happening, if you look at the cancer rates, autoimmune issues, neurologic issues, they all seem to affect women more than men. Whether or not that was purposeful, I don't know. But we have got to, it is really alarming. I had a conversation yesterday with Reggie Littlejohn, who is running the Sovereignty Project and really trying to keep us out of this dreadful pending treaty with the World Health Organization. Interestingly, of the nations that, oh yeah, she's doing remarkable work and everybody better get on board with this, or the world as we know it, our freedom is gone. Interestingly, of the countries that have signed, raised the alarm flag about that and said, no, we don't want to participate, there are 11 of them. There are countries like Iran, Syria, Cuba, Belarus. Wow. You know who's missing from that? The United States. The United States has, we're all in. We're all into the One Health. I like you very much, but you and I don't have the same health. I'm here to say we don't have one health. My health is not your health. And likewise. So, it's really, really alarming. So I'd love to know where are you taking this next? You've got this incredible energy, you're right. You know the data. Where are you taking it?
Well, I just wanted to note, and I promise I'll answer your question, that though pregnant women were excluded from the Pfizer internal trials, nonetheless, 270 women in the Pfizer documents got pregnant anyway. Pfizer lost the records of 234 of them, which is illegal.
Well, of course
of the 36, of course they did. Of the 36 women whose records remain, over 80% of them lost their babies. And that's just one of the two places in the Pfizer documents that shows shocking levels of spontaneous abortion and miscarriage. So where am I taking this? Well, I guess, in Facing the Beast, I talk a lot about the death of the innocents. I mean, it's interesting. If you really want to know, I'm reading the Geneva Bible in a separate series of videos, 1560 Founders Bible, and we're at Exodus. And it was a time in which, the babies were being sacrificed by state policy. Pharaoh was like, get rid of all the children of Israel's babies. And, it's incredible to think that we're in a time that literally echoes the Hebrew Bible, in which state policy around the world knowingly is killing babies, at massive, unimaginable scale. So I guess this may not be the right place to say it, but in Facing the Beast, I go from looking at what's really happening to humanity to asking a question like, why is this happening? And I personally have come to the conclusion that, humanity is being tested, I don't know if we'll survive this or not, but I think it's a spiritual battle. I think it's a battle between good and evil. I think we've spoken a little bit about that before.
Yeah, I tell people I feel like I'm living the book of Revelations right now, and I know how it ends. So I truly feel like we are living in the end times. Personally, I am still hopeful about it because I know where I end up in it, and I'm okay with that. But I think
it's tough if you're Jewish, right? Because it's like doesn't end that way for us. We just just go off into the ovens or into the mountains of Babylon. It's like I don't know if there's a happy ending, but I do know that I do believe. Moving it back to the material, because I know this is not a kind of California kind of show where we leave the material for too long. I do believe, and I see that even as existing institutions are crumbling, like people's trust in health, like CDC, FDA, CNN, NPR, it's collapsing, right, as it should. But I do see new communities arising and new new institutions being built. Look at us. Alternative media is now bigger than legacy media because legacy media sold their souls. There's no other way to say it. So I think, if we react correctly, this is 1776, and we really could rebuild America, and we could save, some of the babies, if not all of the babies, and some of humanity, if not all of humanity, and maybe rebuild science, rebuild medicine. I do think that's possible. People have done it before in completely corrupted societies. They've, on the ashes of the completely corrupted societies, they've built healthier institutions. I believe it's possible. But first, people really have to know and face. That's why the title is Facing the Beast. What is the beast? I mean, the beast could be this malevolent state policy around the world that's destroying women and destroying babies and destroying kind of humanity and human health. Or it could be the ugliness that we saw in 2021, 2022, where people turned against each other. A two-tier society was built up. People embraced exclusion. Maybe the beast is that isolation that was inflicted on us, loneliness, leaving our elders alone to die by themselves. I mean, I think you can interpret the beast any way you want, but I think we're in a time where we have to face up to the ugliness that we've committed. It's a very kind of days of awe time, and, commit to not being ugly anymore if we're going to save ourselves.
I will tell you, it's interesting to that point. I spoke this past weekend at a conference in Spokane, Washington, a medical freedom conference. And I was stunned at the number of people. There were physicians, nurses, physical therapists, pharmacists, who have all thrown off the mantle of the standard system. They have all gone insurance free. They've gone concierge. They're saying the hell with all of it. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing your electronic medical record. I'm not sure there was a vaccinated person in the room. They've all lost their jobs. Many of them got fired and kicked out. And they said, good, I don't need you. I'm done with you. And I was in the state of Washington, of all places.
Amazing.
Not like I was in Iowa, or Arkansas.
Right.
I mean, I was in the state of Washington, and it was kind of a challenge for me to get there. The travel was a bear. I'm dealing with a bunch of my own health stuff. And I thought, why am I doing this? And I'm so glad I did, because it sort of renewed my faith in mankind and my faith in my fellow, medical healthcare professionals. I said, maybe there are more people out there who do have a clue, and they're quietly just sort of saying, I'm done with this, and we're creating a whole new system. And so maybe maybe we're about to tackle the beast and hopefully come out on top.
I love that. There was I think this may be happening across the country, maybe even throughout the world. There was a conference called Back to Basics in Wellesley, Mass. that I attended a few weeks ago. And it was the same thing. I've never seen anything like it. Doctors and nurses and like psychiatrists even. And they've been like, nurses have created nursing networks where you go right to the nurse and you bypass the whole sick medical system. It was fascinating because they also explained step by step how medicine got corrupted, and electronic medical records featured largely in that corruption of the system. But if this is really happening throughout the country, and if we can still have capitalism and not be taken over by globalist kind of oligarchical communists, the market will speak, and people are flocking to the wellness company. People are flocking to telemedicine with people that they trust. I'm trying to do everything I can to never see a conventional doctor in a hospital setting again. And I think there are a lot of us. So that's a very hopeful sign. It's a beautiful sign.
No, that's actually the wellness company. Talk about a great example of a group of people, all of whom were targeted, had, really faced the slings and arrows during this. And their response was to gather together, not to reject their patients, not to abandon mankind, but to instead band together, create some unbelievable solutions. They're the ones creating, I think right now, the best targeted therapies to fight off the spike protein and to treat whatever element this is of long COVID and to really address people's issues. They are a great example of that. So I hope, Naomi, that more of this is going on in little pockets and we just aren't aware of it all the time because we're constantly facing the ugly, but there's really little pockets that are about to bubble up and sort of band together.
I think so.
Drew,
I hope so. At TWC, again, to pile on that, I think they have goals well beyond what they've been doing so far and really coming together and creating a new kind of medicine. Ultimately, I think it's a great idea. I'm seeing little pockets of similar kinds of things out there, and I think it's something whose time has come. And I'm going to be moderating a panel in a couple of weeks with RFK Jr. and Asim Malhotra. So be interesting to see. And they several other medical freedom types. So it's just an extraordinary time. It is scary though. It does feel like Book of Revelations and end times. But I like both of you. I remain very positive. I have an optimistic bias, I've noticed, and it actually affected me during COVID, where I was like, wait a minute, how bad actually is this? And my bias helped me to see the truth. But it gets very confusing. It's very difficult to sort everything out, and we have to be, humility, care, caution. All these things are worthy words to keep in mind all the time. I never thought words like freedom and bravery, as I've told you before, that would be also top of mind, but they are. Right. And again, today, Naomi has further refined my own humility. I knew I was dismissive of you, but I didn't realize I was dismissive of this thing, menstrual health, let's call it. I guess we don't have a word. We don't have language, proper language for it yet. But it was always very and as you said, when it comes to male health and certainly penile health, the world might stop turning if all men suddenly had a problem right there. And we are we're very dismissive of women's menstrual issues. And if you think about it, I'm just vamping here for a second, but you think about it, the incredible power of that moment when a woman is 11, 12, 13 years old and this begins, men have no idea anything. And then to have that cycling and that part of their regular sense of their own being and health, men have no idea about that. And when it goes off, we're like, oh, so what? So what? Maybe you have a skin rash. Oh, your period's a little irregular. What's the big deal? We have no appreciation. And I didn't really think about it with the way I should have. Here I am, 60 some odd years of age, just waking up to how it's really pathetic, and a physician, and just really waking up to how, I don't want to use too strong a word, but it's insensitive is really what it is, insensitive. And as usual, women take everything on themselves. It's all, they take it on for themselves, on behalf of themselves, on behalf of women. And it's really this time that we paid attention. So part of us coming out of the death of the innocents includes being more realistic about women and women's health, I would say.
I appreciate that. But again, Dr. Drew, you are forgiven because on this journey, intention is everything. And the other thing is, women these are shameful secret things. Women are not, I see on Twitter all these, bought off doctors saying, well, I don't see any evidence of this. Well, women are not going to go on Twitter and say, I am passing clots out of my vagina. They're just not going to. It's shameful. It's miserable. It's embarrassing. And I guess what I would say to your lovely peroration there is, women don't talk about this a lot, but it's hard to menstruate, even when everything is working perfectly and you're a healthy woman, it is hard to menstruate. It's hard to carry a baby. It's hard to give birth. It's hard to breastfeed. None of it is easy, even when everything is perfect. And women have been told to be silent about all of it. So maybe this discussion is very positive. I hope it leads women to be more open and less ashamed. But don't beat yourself up too much, Dr. Drew, because you're facing 5,000 years of being, of women being silenced about the processes of their bodies, especially their reproductive bodies.
So let's leave it there. No doubt we'll be back with more. There's a lot, it's always more to talk about here as we try to slog through. Get the book, Facing the Beast. It's out now, Naomi?
You can pre-order it now, which is very important.
Pre-order.
Publishers say, but pre-order it on Amazon. It'll be out November 9th.
All right, we will do so. And Kelly, as always, thank you so much. And thank you for yesterday. We were watching from afar and we're intrigued by that whole conversation.
It was
Oh
a
my
great
goodness.
conversation.
Yeah, there's just more to be worried about all the time. And I'm looking forward to coalescing around the truth one day soon. I still worry about a
Yeah.
lot of things. I worry about stuff, and I want us all to get this right.
Yeah. If we go to the root of this social credit score, my social credit score is going to be pretty bleak. So I'm going to, I'm screwed. So let me tell you right now.
Mine would be
Yeah.
non-existent.
Yeah. My social credit score isn't likely to be very high. So, I'm definitely fighting against it. But anyway, thank you for being back. You're always a joy to have. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you guys.
And also,
Take care.
Naomi, we'll let you go. And also to Dr. Guetzkow, we appreciate his participation. Kelly, I have one question for you that I was going to ask him before. He had a technical problem. If you remember, he said his computer battery was going dead, and lo and behold, it did. But the issue he's making, and he made on the John Campbell, he was interviewed by John Campbell, I think, recently. And he made a big deal out of the bait and switch, which what he talked to us about last time.
Right.
And I started thinking, I don't really know what the issue is. I mean, what if somebody, and I'm saying this somewhat facetiously, so I want you to straighten me out. So what if somebody makes a shirt and puts a alligator on it and calls it, Lacoste, as opposed to somebody puts a horse on it and calls it Polo? Maybe it's the same shirt. What do I care if different brands put their brand label on the same thing? How is Comirnaty different than the Pfizer studied vaccine?
Okay, so you're conflating two different things. The bait and switch didn't have to do with that piece of it. The bait and switch had to do with the very limited studies that were done using not using this DNA process where they did the E. coli and they grew it. It was done. So the very
PCR.
limited studies that were done, the
PCR.
PCR, exactly, and
Got
then
it.
what they actually launched to the public was this thing that was grown with DNA on the E. coli DNA and has the plasmids in it. Totally different thing. Totally, it would be like,
got it.
You got something past. Here's the macaroni and cheese that you got passed through the food, and then you totally replace all the different components with something else and say, I mean, they're totally different products.
Still looks the same. Still looks the same. Looks like macaroni and cheese.
Totally different products.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So,
and is that the one that's labeled Comirnaty?
No,
Comirnaty, or was there another switch?
Okay. So you get this thing that goes out under the EUA, but it's now made with the DNA. Okay, so it's not what they tested.
Right.
So all the testing they did before and doesn't even apply because we don't even know. No testing was done on this new stuff. So that gets the emergency use authorization. Subsequently, sometime down the road, the FDA now approves Comirnaty, which they say is identical to the emergency use authorization product, but it's identical to but distinct. Okay. And the reason this was sleight of hand, they did this because they knew very well that they would capture more people who were vaccine hesitant, because many people were saying, well, I'm not getting this thing until it's FDA approved. So the FDA said, okay, we're now approving it. Stamp approved. It's now called Comirnaty.
I see.
But the Comirnaty wasn't, in order to allow, number one, Pfizer to use up this huge stockpile they had of the emergency use authorization, the stuff that wasn't labeled Comirnaty, in order to allow them to use all that up whilst remaining totally protected from any liability. Because if you get injected with any of those, if they don't say Comirnaty on it, they are by definition emergency use authorization product, and therefore the company has no liability. So they allowed them to use up this huge amount they're still using it up. There's still no Comirnaty in the United States. If you go in today and say, I never got vaccinated for COVID, but now I'm, feeling badly about, myself, and I'm now going to go get it. And you go in to get a Pfizer shot, you are going to get the emergency use authorization stuff, the BioNTech. That's not Comirnaty. And therefore, if you drop dead or have a problem, you can't sue them. So that was, again, it was sleight of hand, but that stuff that ultimately made it to the market was the second product. It was the bait and switch. It was not
so hold on.
the stuff that got limited.
Yeah, I get it, but now, if I'm looking at it from the UK, say I'm in the National Health Service there.
Yep.
Are they distributing Comirnaty, and is that the DNA product that is still not the PCR product from Pfizer?
Correct. It is the DNA product.
Got it.
But you are likely you can get Comirnaty in the UK, but they did it here in the United States to make people think that what they were getting was an FDA-approved product, and it's not. If you ask to see the vial, I promise you it will not say Comirnaty on it. So it was, but yes, it is. It's the second process. It's that second process, which is where the DNA plasmid contamination came in.
Yeah. Well, and that story is going to get told. I didn't dig into it with Naomi, but I think she was talking about going to visit that professor in South Carolina, isn't she? The one that had been raising the issues around this. Is that So so we this is a story that is coming down the road here and should be on our radar very soon. So stay with us, and we will report on that as we get it, and we will no doubt be interviewing the major players because nobody else does, except we should get them and hear what they have to say.
Exactly.
So, all right.
All right. So we're good. Let's put up, if Caleb can put up the upcoming guests. I ran them yesterday and went over them, but their schedule.
All right. Bhattacharya tomorrow. I'll be interested to hear what he has to say about these very same issues. Rob Schneider on Tuesday, my old friend. We are going to talk about how he and I were attacked by the New York Times and how that article looks now in retrospect. Next Wednesday, when Kelly joins us again, Peter McCullough comes in and we will talk about these issues we were discussing today.
Yep.
There was something you said today. I thought, God, I got to ask him about that.
It's specifically the thing I really want to. The myocarditis is really about differentiate. The thing with Peter is really about the ability to put to bed once and for all that these cardiac issues are actually, no, it's a side effect of
vaccine.
COVID. Dr. McCullough has made it very clear that we can differentiate and that these are vaccine-related cardiac issues, not cardiac issues that are secondary to someone having had COVID.
Okay, we'll walk through that, and we'll see you then, Kelly, next Wednesday, and we'll see everybody else tomorrow at 3 o'clock, our usual time, with Jay Bhattacharya. Thanks, my dear. See you soon.
Bye.
Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/help.
I have a question about this, Drew.
Yeah.
So how much do you think that they are trying to advance medicine in terms of like pharmacy options, like in terms of medication you can take, or how much are they just trying to we have Lexapro now, so let's push that and just deal with the side effects? Or are they trying to develop things without these side effects?
From the moment, this is how pharmaceutical research works. From the moment you pull a molecule off the shelf and identify it, you have 10 years to bring it to market and profit, and then you lose the patent. 10 years from the moment it comes off the shelf. On average, it takes 5 years and over $1 billion to bring a new drug to market. So they are left with 5 years to make their profit. Then it goes generic, and then it's pennies. So they only have 5 years with these drugs. So that's the only time they push them, is during those years when they can make profit. And when there are new things that seem to have new benefits and seem to be better than previous things, doctors use them, even though they get a little more costly. But they have to recoup around somewhere between $800 million and $1.5 billion, depending on the drug. That's why the pharmaceutical industry is such a mess, because it costs so much money to do the phase 3 trials and get things through the FDA. Now, the easiest thing to do is to take a drug you already have and change it a little bit and retest it for, you could do that in a couple of years. You can get it through the FDA very quickly. And that's why there's a million different Pepsids, Xanax, Tagamets. That's why there's a million different Protonix, Prilosec, Nexium, because they're called Me Too drugs. That's the most profitable way, because then you have 7 or 8 years to make your profits back. And usually it doesn't cost as much to get it to market. So that's why that happens.